Okay, we're ready to go.
Good evening and welcome to the March 22nd, 2023 Gilliland Central School District Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion meeting. First on the agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from the February 28th meeting. So I'll give you all a minute or two to look through those minutes from the last meeting. And whenever someone's ready to make a motion to approve them.
I make a motion.
Nina? Oh, what's that, Rebecca?
I just said I
make a motion. Okay, Nina, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. We'll pass on to the agenda items. Let's see. Okay, so first on the agenda after the minutes, we have reports from subcommittees. I'm going to work backwards here and first start with student voice. And if I remember correctly, Chris, are you sharing for student voice?
I think I am.
Oh, Maxine, okay.
So last month we sent out like our form to students asking if they like wanted to be involved, and we got back like a lot of positive feedback from both students and teachers who wanted to join. Like we were originally just sending emails out. Originally the message was just intended for students, but it ended up being like received by a lot of teachers who wanted to join too. So we are in the process of drafting emails. The emails are going to be invitations to the subcommittees, and they're going to be emails reaching out to people who said no to the forms, because our thinking is like if they took the effort to even fill out the form, then like there's some level of interest, or maybe they're unsure about what we're asking. So Savannah and I are drafting an invitation for the high school, and Chris, and then the middle schoolers, Kylie and Eleni, are drafting emails, and then we're having some. We're just trying to reach out to people. Something on our agenda that we're also considering is participating in like the Pride Parade as like either like a partner with the alliances at the middle school and high school, or like just sort of sending it out to them and helping them organize it. So we're working on sharing like all of our ideas and like really getting things started more for like next year, so that more students can come in and like fill the roles of the students that are graduating.
That's great, Maxine. Does anyone have questions for the Student Voice Committee?
Okay. Maxine, how's the planning for the hate rally going?
Honestly, we've been working a lot on we're doing presentations for the kindergarten through 5th graders, hopefully before April break. Right now, like the process is like I've sent out emails to clubs asking them about their participation, and we're starting planning on like all of our activities and stuff. So it's going really well. We have like a lot of projects coming up that like we're all working hard and like really excited about.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you, Maxine. Next, we'll go to the Research Committee.
All right, I'll be reporting out for the Research Committee. We met on March 8th, and on that day, on March 8th, was when the survey went out that we talked about last time. So that survey was going to the New York Association of School Psychologists, and that went out to over 3,000 school psychologists. And so we hope to have the results back mid-April, and that survey will be closed in May, and then we'll be able to dive into some of that data. Then we got into a good conversation about different programs and services, translation services, that you can call and get a live translator, that some hospitals use, some schools are using. And so we decided one of our next areas of research is to reach out to school districts and find out if they're using any of those services, how they're using them, how they're paying for them, how, if it's, grants or through the district. So we're each taking a few school districts to contact and get more information on that. And then another good conversation that we got into is just starting to talk about and think about mascots and, what other school districts are doing, if they're making changes and how that's working. So kind of diving into that a little bit and see what's going on.
Thank you, Carla. Does anyone have questions for the research committee? No? Okay.
Are we going to be talking any more tonight about that topic of the school team, the school name, nickname, and the logo and all that stuff? Or, Carla mentioned it just now. Are we going to talk about that any further?
Under food for thought still. So that was my plan, that
Okay.
we were still going to talk about that. Thank you, Carla.
Yep. Thank you.
Next, community engagement.
That's me.
Okay.
Yes, I couldn't find my off button either. A lot of our committee was devoted to talking about the fireside chats and attendance during the day as opposed to attendance in the evening, getting advertisement out. We definitely, I think, have more people in the evenings than we do in that 12 to 1 slot. But we talked about getting it on the district calendar, getting the advertising out. And also, there was some discussion is when people come in with questions, letting them know we're absolutely a resource to really listen and forward that information on, but we're not here to make any decisions or, we don't do policy, we don't do any of that, but we certainly can be, I don't want to say a mediator, but we can be the person who listens and brings it back to a larger committee and to a larger group. We talked about how important PTA meetings are to have our presence there. And again, another way to get the idea of the DEI committee out and, what we're about and what we're trying to do. We also spoke a little bit about the mascot issue, and, realizing that's really, a whole district level thing that will really be looked into, but, how does it impact the students who really have some concerns about what's being used. We did say that the Tourette's Awareness Club was having a fundraiser at Chipotle that has passed. But another good thing with these clubs do have some events is to make sure that, we get that information out there the best that we can help them with that. And March is Down Syndrome Acceptance Month, and World Down Syndrome Day is yesterday. So again, things that maybe we can be more helpful in getting out to the community and letting them know what's going on. How'd I do, Matt?
That was great.
Okay.
And Nini, you had a question, then I'll hop in and I can talk about the fireside chat from yesterday,
Great.
if I have my days right.
Hey, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So regarding the fireside chat, and maybe Matt, you're going to address this. So I'm just curious, has there been any discussion about a virtual option? I know we had talked about that at one point, it's a possibility, but naturally the evenings are more accessible for, I think, most people. And I know that one observation made from the feedback from the community in general when we were reaching out to the groups was virtual is something that is a benefit for many families. So given that, has there been any talk about holding virtual fireside chats as well? I know there's a maximum number of people that can join them just by virtue of how many can join the virtual meetings. But I'm wondering if that's something too that would help to encourage more attendance.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. There's some of the complications with it. Would be fully virtual? Would it be hybrid? If it ends up being hybrid, in my experience, what's happened a lot is some of the folks who are virtual can be kind of left out of the conversation, especially if you have like 15 people on one screen. It can be harder for, people to be as much a part of the conversation. But that being said, it's not as if like I'm not opposed to people being able to have a window into it. I think it serves the purpose, like Mary was mentioning, for communication, for transparency, if it's for folks to gather information. One thing that the engagement subcommittee has talked about is trying to think about the format for how we're doing these, even going into next year, because we're kind of getting off the ground right now. We've talked about some different things like, okay, is it possible if we have some people doing a evening one and some people doing a morning one, so both can happen each month as opposed to alternating months, and that might make it more frequent that people could attend, and maybe one of those ends up being virtual. So I think we're certainly open to exploring all kinds of different formats, and we're kind of seeing what's working, and bridging that to yesterday. One thing that we have definitely seen is increased attendance at each one. So the last one was the largest one that we've had so far. And that was even with it being during the day. So that makes me really hopeful for what's going to happen in April. And it was solid discussion the entire time. In fact, we ended up going over, I'm not even sure by how many minutes, but probably at least, a good 15, 20 minutes minimum that we went over.
Matt, I would like to jump in about the virtual thing.
Yes,
Well,
yes, go ahead.
I think we're in person, but we can
We are.
offer, call in future. Like we can open our laptop and give a link. If people are interested and they cannot come in person, they can call in. That's another, at the same time, when we are in the public library. How about that? So if you want, I can facilitate that. I provide the people a link. If they cannot come in, for example, at night or at noontime, they can call in. They can join virtually on the Google link, and we will at the same time, when we do the fireside chat, people can join virtually. That's something that we can do, I guess.
I think it's a good idea though to have, if we're going to do a virtual one, to have a just virtual one, because then that really sort of shows the people that aren't able to come that we do value them, and they're not.
So I guess what I mean is like hybrid model.
I think rather than hybrid,
people have, we may not have that much time dedicated for different sessions, but we can do a hybrid version. Some people can call in, some people can show in person if they want. So that's what
Well, if it's okay, maybe because Matt, since you have them scheduled right till the end of the year already with the plan, that maybe you can see if that you can think about if that makes sense with the current schedule, or if that's something we start for next year. So I don't know, some time to think about it.
I'm in agreement. That's where I think it's a conversation to bring back and have on the agenda for the next engagement subcommittee for us to be able to parse through that, because it's an extremely valid point. And Maxine also put something in the chat that I do want to highlight. The idea of some of these, maybe appointment slots during this, if someone did want to have a one-on-one conversation, the way that that's played out is people have either kind of lingered and stayed a little bit afterwards or talked early on. But I think that serves a different need than the general one, because right now the format, I wrote it as a comment, but I know that's not going to be visible to everyone who's watching right now. In short, for folks who do want those one-on-one conversations, it's often played out with, they might email me or call me or Dr. Rouse or whomever, and then we will have one-on-one conversations. So it's not that doesn't happen, but that's just not currently something that's in place with Fireside Chat. So I think that there's just a lot of things that are food for thought, but for us, sorry. I honestly,
we do see the increase of attendance yesterday. We were there, and there's a much more discussion than the previous two sessions. I guess our business is booming.
Yeah, it certainly is growing, and it's nice seeing that happen each time. Tan, I don't know if what you want to say you just put in the chat, but you did have your hand up too if you want to share that, and then I'll address the specifics of the last Fireside Chat.
Yeah, I just
with the advertisement, especially Michael, helped. I guess next session probably will much more attendance.
Yeah.
Hybrid, maybe, yeah. We can discuss in our subcommittee meeting.
Yes. Yeah. I'd say, yeah, we'll move that discussion over to the subcommittee and clear up some space here. But sorry, go ahead, Tayan.
I just typed in what I was saying. Like, if we do virtual, we can have a facilitator that, like, kind of like someone can type in the chat if they have a question, and then the facilitator can read it out loud. So that's not everyone talking at once.
Yeah. No, I like that idea.
Anita, I had a question too. Did you see that, Matt? What topics were consistently raised?
Yes. So speaking to the last meeting, I wrote this in the chat, but there were 9 people who had intents, but that's also including members from the subcommittee. And it was a pretty good conversation. We talked about things ranging from thoughts on the potential board DEI policy that had been brought up recently. We talked about the scope of DEI work and the reach and inclusion of it, particularly in regards to our special education programming and resources for students. A big thing that came up, and this was a center of a majority of the conversation, I'd say, is community interactions and building trust, and how are we gauging, how do we know if we're making progress in bridging the gap that may exist between some folks who are really, really gung-ho about DEI work and some folks who have hesitations about that. And what does that look like? How do we answer some tough questions that people may have? And even just reaffirming for one member who ended up coming, what is the purpose of these meetings and how do we do better advertising to entice more people to be able to come? And I really do think that, because it's just been consistent. Each one, there's been 4 so far. Each one's had more people. And I think part of it is word of mouth. Part of it is the communication from the district. But one of the big questions that was brought up is, so what about folks who aren't currently, receiving communication from the district, but are still community members who might still want to weigh in or have their voice heard on things? And, we talked about what happened with the FMS students and what was fantastic with what they created, but also what are some of the ways that we might be able to advertise. So if one of us is going, could we put on our own social media, hey, headed to the library for blah, 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 blah. And then it would increase it even in our own circles. So those were some of the main things that got brought up. And it was a really, really productive conversation, I felt. And anyone else who's there can chime into that, but Blanca, go ahead.
I was not there. I just have a question. Matt, would you say that in general, or this question is for anyone who's attended, do you think that the conversations have been cordial and respectful?
I would say definitely. And it doesn't mean that they are without emotion or strong feelings and sentiments, but
there are some tough questions.
Yes, but I think, but I think the conversations were still though cordial in that I didn't feel cut off at any point when I was talking, nor did I feel like I was being attacked. And I don't know that anyone else, and I'm speaking from my lens. Other folks who were there, yeah. So yeah, folks who are watching, my classroom felt the same way. So I think that was a thing. And they were tough questions, but I didn't feel like it was disrespectful, if that makes sense.
So I think that that's a huge success in itself. So thank you and great job to everyone that has been facilitating those, but especially you as our leader.
No, thank you. I really, really enjoyed it. It was great. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Hi, I was able to find some time yesterday to go over there and join Matt for the fireside chat because it's been a priority for me. I think it's important for the community to see a school leader engaged in this conversation so they can see it from the ground perspective. So it gave me an opportunity to answer questions from stakeholders who are all across the continuum in this conversation, right? So the DEI conversation has a broad spectrum of people and they're across a continuum. And if we can, if we have opportunities to engage people in this conversation, I think it's good. And I think yesterday was an awesome experience. Matt did a great job facilitating it. Obviously, we want to get more people to come to these opportunities. So I think our efforts with like advertising these things are good efforts. So that's what I would comment. And thank you.
And if it's okay, we'll go to the last subcommittee because we're still at the very top of our agenda. And but this is great discussion, and this is kind of a segue into, I think I'm supposed to give the communications update. So I'll just go through them really quickly. One of them that has to do with this was the fireside chats, is that the studio art students at school have completed designs for advertising the fireside chats, which and Dr. Wiles or Mike, you can just jump in if I'm saying this wrong. As of right now, there's like 9 different models, or Matt too. I know you're the one that was really reporting on this. I think, I think that there was a discussion about tapping into studio art in the future and making this maybe even a regular thing, because I haven't seen all the artwork, but from what it sounds like, there's been some really great artwork that could be used to advertise this fireside chats. And then we could even maybe put the student's name in the corner so we could see that it's really, this has been student driven.
I think you got it.
Okay, thank you. And then second, we had the multicultural calendar of events update, working on putting some of that, some of those dates that are important to the community on the website. So we talked about an internal calendar, maybe just for faculty and staff, but then an external calendar, just that would be on the website so people could kind of read a little bit about what that holiday is. And then lastly, future things to watch out for was that how can we promote this work moving forward? The research committee survey, that Gildan isn't a silo and that many others are working in this space. And so when we get that data back, that would be really a great way to show the community that this is, we're just one of like many other communities doing this. And then lastly, the student voice membership, to make sure that kids know that their voices are heard and amplifying their voices. And so it sounds like, from Maxine's report, that is exactly what they're working on. So I think we're in a good spot with that. But yeah, I don't know, Matt, I don't know, you can think about this later, but when we could share that, or when you could share the artwork with maybe like the group or something, I'm sure people would love to see that.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Well, we received some of the artwork in different sort of formats, so we're trying to figure out like how to best publicize it. So we have it digitized, we have it, in hard fashion. So that's basically where we are. So we can definitely push that out, I'm sure, soon enough.
Awesome. Oh, Dr. Wiles?
On this very topic, we've been doing periodic Friday updates. And a couple weeks ago, we did an update with all the fireside chats. If we had the artwork digitized, Patrice could link it right into the message that goes to every single family who gets our messages, which is most. And then the art would get a lot more visibility as well. So when we have those ready, and if you want to send them my way, we can do that very easily.
That's awesome. I thought that was like a great thing to hear, and a great way to like get the students, involved in the work. And I'm sure they could come up with way better ideas than what, at least that I would come up with advertising that. So let's move on to the next agenda item, which is DEI in action. And I'll turn this back to Matt.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rivera. So for this category, we really wanted to focus on Conference Day because it was a big day for every building in the district in regards to their equity plans. So this is kind of running in concert with our work with Progression Partners as well. And I'll give the rough outline first, and then Dr. Wells and I will fill in details about what that looked like. But for an hour, each of our equity teams, which are all comprised of about 10 folks with varying job titles in each of the buildings, where they've been working for the past 7 months, going through different workshops, participating in focus groups. Many of you participated in the focus group from the community lens and parent lens. There was also work put in specifically in regards to equity walks around the buildings and looking at New York State report card data. And so we really were doing a mix of quantitative and qualitative data to make these equity action plans. And the plans were unveiled to all the members of the building. So the equity teams presented on them, and members of the building were able to give some feedback. We can talk even to some of the preliminary things that we've heard. Overall, though, again, just in an outline form, things were very, very positively received. And a lot of folks seemed excited to engage in this work. And I think that the teams, I was able to make it to 4 different buildings for that part, and the teams did a phenomenal job presenting. They did a great job articulating their work, great job showcasing what that work has looked like. Some modeled activities, some were able to do a more Q&A to really address some of the concerns. So they all took different approaches, but they all were very, very impactful. And one other thing that's related to this on conference day, teachers at the high school also engaged in a workshop in regards to an assembly coming up on Friday in regards the topic being hate speech. So this is something where all the faculty and staff is being part of some work surrounding a conversation with kids. So there'll be a brief assembly in the morning to start off. And then students will be able to go back and with like homeroom, spend some time with their teachers, facilitating discussions, or doing a range of different activities that are going to meet what's going to feel best and work best for the students who are in that room. So there's kind of a menu that teachers can choose from. But the one thing that everyone's going to be doing in common is some reflection on the assembly and the idea of that post-assembly conversation. We heard from some students last time that, they wanted space to talk about things, and it was kind of tough with things being back to back. We weren't able to have some of that. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide a forum for this to happen. Now, just in transparency, there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and we know that people's experiences are going to be different just based off of grade level and all these other things. But it's very important for us that we articulate to students, and I'm going to do this on Friday, that this is not the totality of the conversation. Rather, this is a start of the conversation. And the conversations that happen in homeroom, that's part 2 of the conversation. That's not the end of the conversation. So there's an invitation. Even if someone doesn't want to speak out loud during their homeroom portion, they are invited to share their thoughts with me or one of the building administrators. And it's not relegated to just that day. So that's kind of our structure with that. And that's the broader outline. Dr. Wells, you want to kind of speak on some of the other staff feedback that we heard from that day?
I do, but before I do that, I just want to note that we're getting some help on Friday from some of Matt's colleagues in neighboring districts. So his counterparts from Bethlehem, Niskayuna, and potentially North Colony will be at our program in the morning, both to assist, but also I'm sure to get a window into the event for possible replication in other community school districts, which could be a really helpful step forward to have this a regional approach. So I think that's awesome that they're willing to come in and help. So we're all really looking forward to Friday. I saw the presentation that Matt and his colleagues put together. It's terrific. It's really grounded in student experiences. So I'm looking forward to it. And I'll just echo, we launched a thought exchange after the presentation of the equity plans on Friday. And we were able to break them out by all 7 buildings because the plans are unique to the buildings. And the response was robust and very positive. I think people genuinely appreciated the hard work of their peers. I think they appreciated the methods that we used that were, slow, thoughtful, and grounded in the individual experiences by the buildings. And there were lots of ideas about how to help us be successful going forward. So, I think we all held our breath a little bit on Friday, and I'm just very proud of the work of the teams and everyone's persistence. And I think we're queued up to do some really terrific work going forward. So we're just really happy with where we are right now. Was there anything else I was supposed to clue in there, Matt?
No, I think that's perfect. And I guess I'll just reiterate that a large part of us doing the introduction of things now takes away this being something that is now just being introduced in September. And then there still is that, period of questions and uncertainty. So now we still have some months in the school year to go through the thought exchange, to continue to have conversations with folks, refine the plans and make them even stronger as necessary, and be able to hit the ground running come fall.
That's awesome. It's really cool to have the other folks come in from the other districts. And so I'm sure that you also feel like you have more resources to pull from too. So that's awesome. Next on the agenda is the equity audit update. And it looks like it's Dr. Wiles and Matt together. And I apologize, Matt, did you have more to say on the DI in action?
No.
Blend in a little bit together.
That's the thing. So honestly, the report for both, it's the same, because the share out was the result of the work with Progression Partners.
Okay.
So this we can think this is kind of a capstone in the work. It's not done, but a major moment in it.
Great, thank you both.
Mm-hmm.
So unless there are questions, we can move on to number 4, the committee membership update. So this is just a reminder. I'll just read this out loud so I don't mess this up. So another communication will be going out soon, asking for letters of interest from those who'd like to serve on this DEI committee, and replacing the members who will be cycling off after this school year. As we've done in the past, the letter will outline the purpose of the committee and ask for which subcommittee that they might be interested in. And then also we'll get all the responses back, share that with the Board of Ed, and then figure out who could be selected on to the committee. In the hope that the newly selected members will be able to attend the June meeting so they can get an understanding of the work before we go off for the summer. And there are currently 8 members who are cycling off, 3 who are graduating, and 5 who've fulfilled their term. If I remember correctly, there's an email that goes out to the community asking for those letters.
So Seema, I can jump in here. The email is almost ready to go. We wanted to have this conversation with the committee tonight, but just for the benefit of those who may be watching, the positions we will fill are 1 community member, 1 parent, 3 staff members, and 3 students. So I would anticipate, I think we may send this Friday as part of a regular Friday communication and put it as the very top item so we can get lots of people's attention and then go from there. So it's March. This is the season when we do all this. So we're hoping for some good response.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Wiles.
How long is the term again?
I think is it 2 years?
Formally, it's 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had a combination of some with 2 and some with 3 to help us get into this a third turnover. So
Right.
it's staggered.
So if we're already in, do we need to reapply when our term is up? It's a good question. I think the idea, and I don't know, Dr. Wells, if you remember, but it seems like every time that there were more letters of interest and the number of spots available. So I feel like the idea would be to try and allow other people to join if there is that level of interest, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
Before we were starting the meeting, I thought, I bet there's going to be a question that we haven't thought about the answer to. True. Here's my gut is that I think if a term is up and you want to reapply, send your letter in, but know that if we have a ton of interest, we might want to, spread the opportunity around. That's my gut at this point. But Matt, do you have a thought?
I was going to say something along those exact lines. And the other part too is even if your term is up in this group, that doesn't mean your term is up in subcommittees. So in all the subcommittees, there's people who are members that aren't part of this group. So I would actually encourage you to stay on. I think that that would be best. But we want to make sure that we are inviting in new voices and kind of having a staggered approach. So there's some folks who've been on it before and then others who haven't. But the subcommittee work, I think that'd be really powerful to be able to have people on. And even if it's, okay, I want to switch to a different subcommittee, that's totally fine.
Yes, there are no term limits on the working committees.
Please don't leave them. Come back.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go on to food for thought. And I think we had a couple of different topics. First was the continuation of the discussion on field trips, because that came up obviously, and I think in the last meeting, and there was obviously a lot of discussion about that, and so we wanted to come back to that. And I don't know what people were thinking and thoughts of. We're not going to solve the world's problems here in this committee, but there are some good discussions to be had about the types of field trips, the purpose of field trips, and equity having to do with field trips. So I guess we can just leave that open to discussion for a little while first. Anyone have thoughts? Mary?
Are we talking about, I know part of the discussion was making sure that all children could avail themselves of the opportunity to go on a field trip. I think that's important. I know PTAs and all the schools help out. And I also know that cost of everything is going up. And are things really, certain activities that have been a tradition becoming cost prohibitive? And to me, that, I don't think that's, as you said, Seema, this committee's decision. That probably goes more to administration to decide. But I think for our purpose is just to make sure that every child can go on the field trip if they want to. And how can we make that happen?
Great point, Mary. We'll have Ty and then Nina.
To go off what you said, Mary, I think a way to make that possible for all kids is to do like educational based field trips as a priority, because there's a lot of grants out there and a lot of free field trips that are offered to schools. Like I know my principal constantly gets emails about free trips that school could take. Maybe doing that as priority, and then if eighth graders want to go, I think it was eighth grade, Great Escape or something like that, maybe just special for just that year. And that's something that the PTA could definitely help with.
Nina?
Yeah, thank you. So my point, I guess, is just something, I don't know if I have a solution to it, but just by observing other districts, it just surprises me how much district to district offers students. You talk to other parents whose children maybe more in affluent neighborhoods or districts have more of the field trips available to them, whereas other schools offer little to no opportunities. And it just speaks to the continued perpetual affluence versus poverty regions across the board, and how we continue to give the kids that are in different districts the edge above others, like long-term implication of that.
Thank you, Nina. I think Blanca and then Elizabeth, just a comment. Okay, go ahead, Blanca.
Thanks. I'll start with a comment, and then I have a question for Mike Laster. Just with regard to the educational field trips, absolutely, I think they're great, and there's value in them. I do want to say, as someone who lived in poverty until about third grade, so what is that, 8 or 9, literally the only outings I had that were fun were those field trips. And so I'm forever like indebted, honestly, to the PTA for Academy of the Holy Names. And I even went there on scholarship. So I literally wouldn't have had any of those life experiences. I went to Storytown twice and to the lake once. I never would have done that with my working parents. So I just put that out there as food for thought. Where, you know, that is something I'm sure that other kids experience. And then for you, Mike Laster, I believe that one of the impetus for this discussion was the trip to the Great Escape this year for the 8th graders. So I wondered if you could give us an update on that.
Yeah, so I think part of the discussion started when we saw the price that it would be take the eighth graders up there, and we were like, okay, last year we went to Guptill's and it was $20 and the kids had a blast and they got free ice cream and it was local and it didn't cost $70 for each kid. So what's the purpose of that trip? The purpose of that trip is to celebrate their Farnsworth Middle School experience. We haven't been able to do that traditionally with that cohort, unfortunately, because of COVID. I still think I have a hard time asking all families in the 8th grade to pay $70 to go to Great Escape, when the reality is, and I went on that trip, if it's class unity, which is the purpose, that doesn't happen at the Great Escape. Like they go away in pockets of like 4 or 5 kids. What I saw last year when they went to Guptill's, I saw kids like helping other kids like up off of roller skating because they didn't know how to do it. I saw kids like talking to other kids that they normally don't talk to. So if the purpose of that trip is to solidify relationships before they go to the high school, then I don't think they need to go to Great Escape for $70.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So I know that our house principal, Kelly Willits, who works, with the 8th grade teachers to try to pull that off, she's got a communication that's ready to go out, to parents and to our kids and say, look, this is the reality. So that's going to come out here shortly. I anticipate that I might have to come to a board meeting and answer questions about it, which is fine, because I'm going to say the same thing at the board meeting that I'm saying here. So that's what I would say to that question, Blanca.
Thank you.
Rebecca and then Maxine.
I think that's such a good point, Mike. And I just had a comment about that we have to, and we might have said this at the last meeting too, but we just have to keep in mind kids with disabilities or medical problems, and not just thinking about the cost barrier, but thinking about, the developmental or physical barrier that kids can have that may be overt or maybe a lot less overt.
So to that point, Dr. Butterfield, this year I was able to go to Tawasantha Park, where our self-contained programs joined our Tawasantha team on an activity all day outside with an adventure, group that came in and did like teamwork activities. So in terms of access to those, team unity things, I think we can do better than a Great Escape trip. That's all I'm saying. And Chris,
great.
jump in, because I know you've been part of those conversations from the counselor lens. So
I agree with what you said. I've chaperoned both those trips, the Guptill's and then in the past, the Great Escape, and just watching the kids support each other and pick each other up off the floor, and kids who were the athletic kids struggling, whereas maybe the awkward kid was like roller skating gracefully backwards. It was phenomenal to see that kind of flipped around a bit. I know my 7th grade team is working on grants for a trip to Thatcher. And some of those things, we have students who have hearing impairments on that group. So being able to include them, we have the play that we got the interpreter services for. So it's not just about the funding, but funding is huge. And if it's an educational trip, there's so many more grant opportunities to get the funding for those. Because those field trips are really important. I miss them. The kids miss them. Those years that we didn't get to have field trips were really tough. And it's nice to see them getting to, interact and socialize.
Awesome. Thank you, Maxine.
Talking about when Mr. Laster was like the experiences of the 8th grade Great Escape trip, the year I went, it rained, like not just rained, like downpoured nonstop the entire day we were there. There was not a single break.
I know.
All the rides got closed. Like it was like
Horrible.
I think everyone made the best of it. Like I remember doing like literally 7 rounds of just bumper cars. Like we just kept going. It was so fun. But like doing something like a rollerblading and ice cream like on that day would have just been like so much more fun. And I think that like I also went to the ice. I also went roller skating middle school. I remember just like I'm an ice skater. I just remember going up to kids being like, "Here, like let me just like hold your hands and like show you how to do it." And then like 5 minutes later, we're like zooming around in circles. Like I think that like it's a really cool experience to like do both things. But like again, Great Escape rained the whole time. So
I went on that trip, Maxine, because your cohort was special to me, and I was so disappointed that we were jumping around in puddles, and I was like, this is like the silliest thing ever.
I just wanted to add that I am totally in agreement with what Mike, what you're saying, and I think that it's great that there are a lot of people aware of this and thinking about that. And I would not want to be an administrator because I feel like you cannot win with this, no matter what you do. So I've just seen it from like some parent side, and I am just like, thank God I'm not an administrator. So I do. That's why I like this committee though, because I know that it's not just a small handful of people that are thinking about this. It's a lot of people thinking about the community. So I think that's important. Does somebody else have their hand raised? I thought I saw a hand like float by. No. Okay. Any other comments about this? I mean, I don't think we'll resolve everything here. And I will say personally, like the things I've seen come home, permission slips, etc. I've seen that addressed on there is I guess what I want to say, that it's not, just going by the wayside and people don't think about that. I don't think there's a perfect solution, but at the very least, I think there's discussion, and it seems like there's a lot of intent on the district side to address that. Blanca, and then Mike.
Yep, I agree that we're definitely paying attention to it, and I appreciate that, and the administrators are aware of it. I would say that my experience in sports so far has not been the same. I feel like it really fluctuates what those dues are for parents, and they're oftentimes sometimes they're called dues, sometimes they're called donations, but they've ranged from $50 to $100. So $50 for one sport, $65 for another, $100 for the most recent sport. And I know that some parents are concerned about that. And I just wonder if maybe we can look into that or sort of keep track of that. Just food for thought.
Thank you, Blanca. Mike, and then, oh no,
No, so I appreciate, Seema, your recognition that we're in difficult spots most of the time, right? Every time a principal makes a decision, 50% are not happy, 50% are happy, and that's just our life. I would recommend, in terms of the field trip conversation, in terms of the equity lens, it starts at the policy level, because that's the guidance that we use in terms of helping teachers understand, like when they plan a field trip, these are the things you need to consider. So right now, our policy and regulations are awesome. I think we could add some, context in terms of look at those planning things through an equity lens. That's it.
Actually, that's a great point. And Dr. Wiles, I know you mentioned as we're drafting that the DEI policy that it's going to intersect with so many other policies, and that's probably like a perfect example that maybe that could be looked at again too, because it obviously is impacted by this work. Yeah, that's a really good point, Mike. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Katie?
Just to add to the sports piece, in addition to the dues, there are events, whether they're meets or special travel events that are extra additional cost to families, which And then there's money that's needed along with those, and should just be having awareness of that. That's a really, if a student can't afford that, that's a really significant missed opportunity for a student who's worked hard through a season to have the same access as their teammates. So just something that we're looking at also.
Great, thank you, Katie. I think we can keep that topic in the food for thought, since these are ones that won't, they won't go away, and so we'll keep that on that list. And then we'll move on to the learning component section of the agenda. And this is a good segue, since we were talking about field trips and the book, this last chapter that we were focused on. I'll turn this over to Matt. If I remember, you said that you're going to facilitate this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you kindly. So I'm just going to put the first question in the chat just so everyone can see it. But the first thing that we wanted to address was thoughts on global citizenship. And is this something that your family values? Now, that's a very, very broad question. But I think that it's one that's worth at least being the spark for this. And the connection I see between global citizenship and what came out in the field trip discussion that's already happened so far is the fact that we all, from what I can gather, acknowledge that it's important for our students to be able to have experiences beyond the classroom. And I think the question isn't whether or not experiences should happen. The question is making sure that experiences are accessible to as many people as possible, and that we want to make sure that we're consistent in engaging people in a way that's going to be beneficial and doing it in a way that people aren't shunned. So with that being said, what are some of our thoughts on global citizenship? Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I just got back a couple weeks ago from Japan, where I was able to take my kid, who is 15, and Japan's kind of my home away from home because I spent a long time there as an adult, like 15 years, and so I was really happy to be able to take her, and think she really had the chance to see another culture operating very efficiently with completely different priorities and assumptions and stuff like that. So there were announcements all the time, wear your mask in the plane or the train or whatever, wear your mask, don't have too many conversations, don't talk on the phone, don't, all this stuff you're not supposed to eat when you're walking around. And, it works well. People don't do those things, and it's quiet, and it's clean. And, it was interesting to see a place that seems to have like a lot of rules, but then it really works very well. And I don't know. So I think it was really neat for her to see something outside of this culture, just to, know that this is one of many different ways that a society can run. It's not the only one. So next up, I think I want to try to go with her to like Montreal or something, where she can use her French, and she can lead our family in actually talking with people there, and be the one to tell us how much something costs or whatever. So
That's really cool. I like that. And right before going to you, Blanca, I'll just a word of caution. French in Montreal isn't exactly the same as France, French in France. I don't know why I said it like that. That was just terrible grammar. But apparently English in Matt's world is also different than English in the United States. So yeah. But that's a really cool idea. I like that. Go ahead, Blanca.
Yeah, I do that all the time, Matt, but I say it's because of ESL. So I agree with Elizabeth. I was also going to say that my personal experience, because that's what I have really, is the world travel completely changed, my perspective, and made me realize that I'm a citizen of not just, Gilderland or New York, but the entire world. And I was really fortunate to be able to travel with my dad, who was an archaeologist. So I got to see all sorts of different cool things. But additionally, there was a sharp contrast when I would come home between collectivistic societies and individualistic societies. And I'm not trying to be derogatory, but I do consider this to be an individualistic society. And I think we saw that for sure during the COVID response, how varied it was from country to country. And then additionally, I was going to say that another experience was with my daughter when she went to Montessori school. Because they have the blended ages in a classroom, I feel like she realized she was part of something bigger. So she had a responsibility to the kids that were technically in her grade and her age, but also to the younger kids that were in the classroom. So, you have a kindergartner, first grader, and a second grader all together, and they all kind of share this responsibility and have their place and rely on each other. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Nina and then Chris.
So, unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to take our children around the world. But on one level, we did go to the Bahamas. So it was interesting to teach them about the dynamic in that community. My daughters were very impressed by how people were and just the different, lifestyle that they were used to. It was really important for them to see that. But from an adult perspective, as a teacher, I was in a comparative exchange. It was called Civics Mosaic. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but it's a collaborative. It's a collaborative study of civics around the world, and Russia was the exchange country. So I was in Volgograd, which is Stalingrad, for a few weeks and taught in a classroom. And from the teacher's perspective of how students are around the world, it was eye-opening for me, because I taught a lesson on the 4 freedoms in America and the 4 freedoms, the same lesson in Russia, or in Russian. I didn't speak in Russian. I taught it in Russia. Anyway, and in our school districts, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the 4 freedoms, right? Freedom from fear, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want. Okay. So based on what you probably know about Americans and the individualism that we have here, the resounding favorite freedom among American students that I found was freedom of speech. That to them was like they would, live and die for freedom of speech. But in Russia, the children, the high schoolers, their most prized freedom was freedom from fear. And to me, that really speaks to a lot of a Russian philosophy of government protects and surrendering rights if necessary. So from a teacher's perspective of having a civics mindset for our students, it helps us to understand. So if we have children from other countries, for example, what is the mindset and frame that we have to be aware of in teaching them? Because we teach from our own American way, but it was, to me, it really opened up my teacher mindset.
Thank you. That is really, really interesting. Yeah. I kind of want to circle back to that, but we have a long list of people, so I won't take up time. Chris, then Maxine, then Kylie.
I will try to be brief. I think it's also interesting to think of alternatives to travel as part of being global citizenship. So, I remember as a student doing where you write letters, pen pals. And Seema, you were in my grade. Maybe you did them too. It was Benin that our pen pals were in, which was an exposure to a teeny tiny country that I'd never ever heard of, and kind of opened my eyes to oh, wow, look at all those countries in this huge continent that I'd never realized how many tiny countries are there, and learning about, the way that those folks lived, that it was so different from how we lived. Blanca, I really appreciate your point about collective versus individual, and Nina too. I also served in the Peace Corps, and, living in a country where the view was like, you do things for other people and your own needs are not the most important, is so eye-opening. I think that there's other options besides travel to start to open our eyes and to also help our students open their eyes to the whole world and how different viewpoints can all have validity. You know, to say that collectivism is really important, and I think we could value some of those things more highly here, but there's nothing wrong with individualism and that it has its values as well.
Thank you. This is honestly going much better than I anticipated. This is really, really great. All right, so Maxine, Kylie, Lewis, and Seema.
So I'm a Canadian citizen as well. Before I got into high school and started doing like a lot of sports and extracurriculars, I would be up in Montreal like maybe once every 1 to 2 months, visiting family. I have family from all over the world. I have family that lives in Japan. I have family that lives in China, and I have just had my eyes like open to so much culture. I think a lot of global citizenship is about like mutual respect for different people's cultures. I think that like every place in the world has like something really beautiful like about like their culture. Like Elizabeth, like I have cousins who live in Japan, and we gave them a gift, and like in America, like you rip open the wrapping paper and you like throw the box to the side, like, but like I thought this was so beautiful. Like they took the time to like untape the wrapping paper and pull out the box and read the instructions. That we got them a hydro flask. They read the instructions for a hydro flask. It's like how to wash it, but like they took so much time to like really respect like a gift that we had gotten them. And I find that like being like, I think that like global citizenship is like really like a core of my family, because it's so important to my family, like wherever we travel, to be like respectful of their customs and like understand like what you can do and what you can't do. And I think that like it's just like a really like, as someone who like comes from like a lot of different places, it's really interesting and cool to like go different places and see like everything that happens in there and like how that's like made my family values and things like that. It's really interesting.
Thank you for sharing. That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you are global. Wow, that's awesome. Kylie, then Lewis, then Seema.
My best friend is from Albania and immigrated here. And every day she brings in this new food, and how she can just switch from her language to American in a blink is just crazy to me. And just how much she's like taught me about Albania and just other cultures besides New York, Guilderland, and America has just really opened my eyes.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and people who are multilingual, it's really, really impressive. Definitely something I wish we didn't, as a nation, we're, more multilingual. Lewis, and then Seema.
Well, I want to share a little bit of my family about the global citizenship. People may think that, pandemic blocks some of the travel opportunities. Indeed, yes. But I feel I work actually around the clock, because I work with our suppliers in Taiwan, in Europe. My kid usually find me call in some meeting at 5 a.m. In the morning, or 4 a.m. if I call in to a conference with people in Poland, for example. So they will actually ask why this is happening. We're in, US, but the whole world today is connected by all kinds of means. In future, we have, metaverse, omniverse, all those approaches to get people connected. You will feel that you are in the whole circle. I think it's a natural trend, but I just feel this earlier. I work around the clock. I feel like this world in future is going to be connected. People will be working together regardless of their country. They have a common goal, but because of physical location, they have to work together. I mean, to achieve a goal. My kid, I used to take my son every year back to China to visit, but these days we have all kinds of opportunity, video phone calls or virtual tour, anything. It's just increasing the opportunity of global involvement for the young kids. I think it's a good thing. We will feel with the technology advancement. I think it's inevitable. You will get it. Like it's don't try to isolate. You will not be isolated. That's a natural trend. People have to work together.
Totally agreed. Thank you. And thank you for sharing, even about your own work experience and family background. Seema and then Elizabeth.
I feel like I have so much I want to say about this, but I'll just pick one thing. This just reminded me of, I think before COVID, the end of the school year, there would be, I think there were German exchange students that were exchanged with Guilderland. So we had like students here from Germany who were here all year. And I think some Guilderland students that went there, I don't remember, but they always presented they always shared their experience at the end of the school year at a board meeting and talked about, what it was like going to school here and the differences between going to school in Guilderland versus in Germany. And the one thing it just reminded me of too is just that I think it's important for even if you're not traveling, to learn that you are a part of a culture here too, like wherever you are living, to learn about the place that you live in and to understand that. Because I feel like when you don't, you think that is the norm. Do you know what I mean? Like that becomes the norm and everything else is just different. But when you have other people come visit, you realize that from their perspective, that's what it looks like to them. I just think it's really important for, even if you're not traveling, just to learn about the place that you live in and to understand what are, parts of your own culture. It doesn't necessarily have to be like your race or ethnic culture, but just part of, where you live, your family norms, etc. And that could be different for other people. But I'll just stop there. And I don't know what happened with the exchange student piece, but I always thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's excellent point. And I'll just say one thing super quickly in agreement with you. The idea of being a global citizen, the United States is a location on the globe. So, we are all global citizens. I think part of it, is travel, but also part of it is having a mentality that we're part of something larger than ourselves. And that's really where we step into global citizenship rather than it being solely American citizenship or even solely American residence. But yes, please go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay. I just wanted to say that Blanca and I think Chris, what I was trying to get at with the thing I said about Japan was like that it seemed like it was people, the main priority there was valuing other people and their health and their experience and their environment. So that was why all the rules about not talking and not throwing food on the ground and, being neat and quiet, and it did make for a really nice environment. But it was the collective versus the individual freedom, And the other thing I wanted to say, just I think any learning about any culture, any language is really good. But I did want to say though, with regard to travel, that I think it is really nice if you can travel one way or another. We saved up money for a long time to go to Japan. It wasn't just like we just went. I mean, I saved money for a long time to go there. So the pandemic was helpful in that. But anyway, it's really amazing to have, and you can't replicate this without going there, to have another language around you, floating all around you in the air. That's not something that you can do here. So you can't replicate Japan here. So it's quite fabulous and very, itself. You have to go to that place to have that experience of having the language be real, that people are really speaking it. It's not just something you learn in the classroom, and that's why I want to take my kid to wherever, Montreal or France or, whatever, because it's, again, the same idea of having a culture that's different from yours, also having a language that's different from yours. It's a great thing to be able to see and hear.
Yes, thank you. And I'll use this as a springboard into our next question because it does touch on exactly that point. I'll just chime in too as a almost selfish plug. One of the reasons why I have mentioned in back-to-back years some of the international trips that students have gone on, it goes first to a point that Blanca made, that this going through something that is school-centered may be some students' only chance to be able to make a trip like that. Now, granted, they are limited in number, so it's not as if you're going to have 1,600 kids go on one of these. But I think that in both of them, what I've seen happen with students, the way that they've seen the world, the individual conversations about, oh my gosh, I've never felt so uncomfortable being American before. And I'm not saying that, being American is something to be ashamed of or anything like that, but it's that awareness of, this is very real. This is something that, like, I went to the store and people didn't speak English, or I was trying to order at a restaurant and people didn't speak English. And I think that obviously that's not something that we as a district could provide to everyone. But the question, though, is something that's been popping up in the chat, and people are already starting to answer it. Are there things that we can do in Guilderland to provide our students with a more global worldview? So some of the things that have already started to come up, yes, there was some affirmations about immersion being impactful. But two of the things that already came up are the cultural fair at the high school, which is always so amazing. That's coming up April 6th. Linwood having International Night, that's coming back this year. So those are two launch pads where it is really about building that culture and things that, have a lot of powerful student voice in there. But what are some of those other things that we can see? And I'll start with you, Chris.
Oh, I wanted to shout out our language teachers. They do a phenomenal job of incorporating more than just language into our world language programming. I mean, a lot of sixth grade is focused on culture and understanding, that language is part of, maybe if you're in a Spanish speaking country, but also all the countries around our world that speak Spanish and how different those cultures are. They do a phenomenal job of including that along with, which helps our students see language as a doorway into those cultures as well.
Right. Yes. I love that point. And actually, I meant to do the same. So thank you for that reminder. Yeah. Shout out to our language department. I met with a lot of our world language teachers. And for folks who may have just been like, I took French, I took Spanish, I took whatever in high school, the courses that they teach, it's world languages and cultures. And so a large part of what our world language departments do, and to be clear, I'm saying world language on purpose, not foreign languages, world languages, because the United States doesn't have a national language. But so in world languages and cultures, it's about understanding the place, and not, if it's Spanish, not just Spain, but are there other countries that speak Spanish around the world, and what are the cultures present in there? And this is true for, insert whatever language. Our E&L department does a incredible job with this as well. So, and I saw, extravaganza getting mentioned in the chat too. And I'll just read, because some of the other things, folks watching, you won't be able to see them still. So lunch choices that reflect cultural differences, extravaganza mentioned twice, visiting speakers, books, musicals and theater productions. And I love all of those three. Same idea about exchange students, and then also ASL, American Sign Language. So seeing all sorts of those other things. Are there things that are outside the box that we may be missing right now?
Oh, I try to, let me add one thing about traveling. I mean, I said we definitely feel the whole world, even we just stay in the United States, because the world is connected today. But traveling is very important. I totally agree that what Elizabeth talked about. I mean, unless you go to that country, you can feel how they feel. Let's say I used to take my son to China, and he heard, from US news or sort of propaganda that they're not happy. Actually, they live very happily in that country. You know, when they go to that country and they talk to people in the country, they say, oh, they will feel that they have, at least they feel happy. And another example is my son told me that Poland ran out of coal because ran out of gas because the Russians stopped the pipeline. But I talked to my colleague; they have no problem. They can manage. You know, unless you really have interacted with them and you feel, you won't know that what exactly happening. You know, the news always have some bias. So I think traveling is also a key part if we can, but you can never escape the whole world. And I mean, in future, everything is connected. That's for sure. But the feeling is different. I mean, you got to at least get some exposure of the personal feeling of people in other country, unless otherwise you won't understand them. That's my point.
Yeah, thank you. And before we go to Seema and Rebecca, just some other things that came up in the chat. Assemblies in schools performed by performers of different countries, and then augmented and virtual reality field trips as well. So Seema and then Rebecca.
Just something that Louis mentioned reminded me of just, you know, where we get our information or news, etc. I have a lot of family in Australia, and I remember I was there for like a month. This was like years ago, and the whole time I was there was all the news was talking about the war in East Timor, and that was like on the news every day. It was this big war, and then I came back home like a month later, and like no one had ever heard of East Timor, like here in the United, like, you know, when I came back, it was on the news there every day. It just, you know, reminded me when Louis was talking about that like we hear about certain things and then we don't hear about many other things happening at the same time. But I think obviously with technology, we could probably be a bit more intentional with that.
Yeah, thank you. And that is, yeah, this, I can say the same is true for news that I would see when I had lived in France, you know, versus what I would talk about with my family back here. Rebecca?
I was just going to say, you know, I think traveling is great. And I'm glad that, you know, I agree that it's a very enriching experience, but not everyone has traveled. Like I've never traveled overseas actually. And I don't think for many of our families that haven't traveled overseas, that sort of minimizes their global citizenship. So I just, you know, want to throw that out there.
Yeah, totally agree. And that circles back to that point, you know, the United States is a place in the globe. And it's also worth noting that many folks who haven't traveled, it's not necessarily for a lack of desire for travel. There's a lot of reasons you can't. Mike Laster?
I guess to talk about Rebecca's point or Dr. Butterfield's point, like I think about the poverty piece of this, right? So there's a significant portion of our population who won't be able to experience what the author has experienced with their family. So in terms of a relevance piece, how do we recreate some type of those experiences for families and kids that this is not in their wheelhouse? And everybody on the screen, I don't know if we can relate to that question. So the virtual field trip idea that Nina put in there is absolutely got legs. Because in the classroom setting, I could take kids to Egypt and they've never been there before, and I put on a virtual reality glasses and they're never going to get there. And that takes resources, right? And technology. So that's I think where we need to focus our energies.
Do we have virtual reality glasses in our district?
Yeah, we do.
Wow.
We have a few sets, and we've actually a few years ago we partnered with Google Expedition as they were launching some of their maps stuff that they were doing with education. So it's in pockets, but you know, that's an opportunity that if we really want to go, you know, throw some resources towards that would be able to provide more kids with, going to Cairo. I've never been to Cairo. I went with the virtual glasses in an 8th grade, social studies class last year. It was awesome. I don't think I'm going to go back because it's going to be too expensive.
Mary?
I would just like to say, I think some of the experiences we can provide, I love the idea of the international night at Linwood. That is awesome. But my experience has been a lot of our kids who, like Mike said, will never get to go to these places, also don't get to come out at night to events. So a lot of these things, I would love to see these cultural fairs like they do at the high school or at the Farnsworth Middle School in each one of our elementary schools. We have a huge diverse population. Get our parents involved. When you talk about speaking languages, wouldn't it be great to learn the different dialects from India? There are so many different things to learn from right within our population that we could do. So I would really like to see how we can explore that, to bring that to each of our schools, to our kids, to do the things that Mike is talking about at all the levels.
Nina, go ahead.
So I'll make it quick, but just want to respond. So we had, and I'm gonna throw a number out, hundreds of people came. Hundreds, right? And I ran the fashion show, and it was really sweet. The kids who came in all of their cultural and ethnic, attire, and just their pride, and the families together, excited to see their kids walk across the stage in their dress. And then we had jazz bands and all kinds of really cool performers that people were showing up with, and dances from Hindu dances and all different types of ethnic performers. And then the food was amazing. We also had donations. So what I did was I called a lot of places to see if they would donate food for the cause. Even Hannaford and places like that will donate plates and things like that. So it was very doable money wise. A lot of hands-on. I was not one of the people that was the main coordinators of this. I was helping as much as I could because my colleagues who ran it are amazing, but they pulled it off. Last time we did it was pre-COVID. It's beautiful just to see the pride that so many people are able to finally have, to honor their cultures.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. And Tip Simon will say, Maxine, you'll have the last word just because of time.
Can everybody hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
So I participated in Pine Bush's Mystery Reader recently, and I came in to read a book, and I ended up reading a book called Island Born about a little Dominican girl who grows up in New York City, because I'm narcissistic and I like to talk about myself. No, I'm just joking. But it's a great book by Junot Diaz. And when I tell you that what it ended up doing, first of all, I got interviewed by second graders, by like 19 second graders. They can all be Oprah one day because they were asking such amazing questions. But what I thought was great was they were bringing in their own stories of going to different countries. There was one little girl who told me that her mom talked to her about all the bats, the big bats in India, because that was a part of the story. They were talking about bats in Dominican Republic and how large they were. So I think that sometimes we believe that these windows into other cultures have to be bigger than what they are. And I think that immersion is absolutely important, 100%. But I know that I've taken my kids to like the Diwali festival at the YMCA when they did it there, and had them be immersed in that culture. So I think that sometimes when we make it large, it feels impossible. But even these small moments where there's someone, and I dressed up for it. I was in full, like my hair was up. I had, a band around my head, like as if I was in Dominican Republic. And they had questions. They had really great questions, and we talked about food, and it was an amazing experience. So I just wanted to share that, Gildan is really doing, and the teachers are really doing amazing things in the classroom. Obviously, there's always room to do better things, and more, but that really warmed my heart and made me feel like a part of the Pine Bush community, being new in that school. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, and I agree. It's the large, but also the small. So Maxine, final word.
I agree with you said, like, Tibisai, like, it can seem so big, but in reality, like, it's the little things. Like, last year is my first experience with the cultural fair because of COVID, and it was like amazing. The one thing I really remember was like there's a massive it's like a massive like Bollywood style like dance, and it was like gorgeous. Like the girls were all in like skirts, and the guys were like the girls all had like skirts that were like flowy, and like they were like shiny, and they had like light sticks. It was amazing, and like it was really cool to see like everyone was in that dance. Like it was like the girls who like it was just like there was all the kids, and like the girls who were doing it like roped their boyfriends into joining, and like it was just like so amazing, and everyone's like screaming because it was so good. And like I just remember like this year for the cultural fair, like I'm sitting talking to like one of my friends because we were going to do it, and the guys I'm sitting around start hearing it and like hearing about us talking about it. And like there's a guy in our class who's from Ghana, and so these four guys, and it's like two white guys, like one Asian guy, and like the Ghanaian kid, and they're doing this Ghana booth, and they're like jumping up and down in this middle of biology class because they're like so excited, because like they're just so excited to like be involved. And like I hear them planning, and they're all gonna wear like the traditional like Ghanaian clothing, and like have this like amazing booth. And like it's just like those little things, like people are excited to learn about like different cultures, and like it's not this like big scary barrier. Like sometimes it's as simple as like making a poster in the gym and just like playing music and like enjoying being like with your friends around like some like really amazing culture. So I'm just like excited for the cultural fair again this year. So it was like amazing experience last year.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I appreciate the rich discussion that we had throughout the entirety of tonight. Thank you, everyone, for sharing things ranging from personal to your professional things, your family experiences, and just being open, which is really our goal. So with that being said, we have crossed the 8:30 threshold. So I will wait. Actually, Sammy, you had close us out. Close us out.
The motion to adjourn. Ty and Nina, all in favor. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.